She was not born a monster. She was turned into one. And that difference changes absolutely everything you thought you knew about this legend. There is something that roams the Brazilian countryside every Thursday night, something that does not scream for help, something that does not hunt like a wild animal driven by predatory instinct. She runs with infernal fire where a human head should be, hooves striking the ground with such force they seem to awaken the dead from forgotten graves. And despite what people say, despite what you were told since you were a small child trembling under the covers, this is not just a story invented to scare disobedient children. This is the Headless Mule. And what you are about to discover will completely destroy everything you thought you knew about her. It will turn upside down every version you have heard, every explanation you were given, every moral lesson they tried to teach you through this legend. Most people believe they know this story. They repeat the same time-worn explanation passed down from generation to generation without question. The same simplistic moral lesson. The same warning whispered by grandmothers in rocking chairs and reinforced with fervor by priests during solemn Sunday mass. But what you are about to hear is not the sanitized version told in candlelit churches or printed in school books with childlike illustrations. This is the version that survives in the back rooms of old houses, where elderly women gather to drink coffee and speak of things their husbands do not want to hear. In the empty, desolate fields where no one dares to step after nightfall on Thursdays. In voices that instinctively lower automatically, without their owners even consciously realizing why their throats tighten and their words come out in whispers. Because what people know about the Headless Mule is only half the story. Maybe not even that. And the half that was hidden, buried, deliberately erased from official records is far, far darker than you could ever imagine in your worst nightmares. Before we begin, I need to warn you of something important. This is not a comfortable story. There is no happy ending. There is no redemption. There is no justice. This is a story about power, control, and what happens to those who dare to challenge structures that were built to never be questioned. If you are ready for that, then stay with me, because once you know the truth, you will never look at this legend the same way again. Never. Let's begin with what you already know. The official version, the comfortable lie. The legend that every Brazilian has heard at least once in their life, usually as a child, usually as a warning. Goes like this. There was a woman who committed a grievous sin, unforgivable in the eyes of God and the church. She had a love affair, a forbidden sexual relationship with a Catholic priest, a forbidden carnal desire, a betrayal against God, against the church, against all divine and human laws that governed rural Brazilian society. And for that, and only for that, the story always emphasizes she was punished in a terrible and eternal way. Some say God himself cursed her directly from the heavens, sending down a bolt of divine judgment that turned her flesh into abomination. Others claim it was the devil who appeared in the dead of night and claimed her soul as payment for her mortal sin, dragging her into a private hell that repeats forever. Either way, the result is always the same, every Thursday night, without exception. Without mercy, without end, she is transformed into a black, headless mule. Violent, raging, infernal flames explode from her severed neck where a human face should be. Fire that burns but is never consumed. Fire that illuminates but does not warm. Fire that causes pain but does not kill. She gallops uncontrollably through deserted fields, sleeping villages, abandoned cemeteries, destroying entire crops that took months to grow, killing innocent animals that cross her path, attacking anyone unlucky enough to be outside on that cursed night. This version is repeated with absolute certainty throughout rural Brazil, especially in the most remote and isolated regions, in the harsh, unforgiving backlands of the Northeast, where the sun punishes by day and fear rules by night, in the deep, mountainous interior of Minas Gerais, on distant farms where electricity arrived only recently, in small forgotten towns scattered across the interior of São Paulo, Goiás, Mato Grosso, where ancient traditions still hold more power than modern laws. It is used as a moral warning, a lesson carved into people's fear, especially young women. An example of what happens when you disobey, when you transgress, when you desire what you should not desire. Do not desire what is forbidden, grandmothers whisper to their granddaughters. Do not question the authority of the church. Priests declare from the pulpit. Do not cross certain invisible lines that separate the acceptable from the condemnable. The community collectively warns. Behave properly, or be remembered forever as an example of what happens when you do not be pure, be obedient, be silent, or become a monster. But there is something deeply strange, deeply disturbing about this explanation when you stop and truly analyze it. Something that doesn't sit right, something that leaves unanswered questions when you really think about the logic of this curse. It places all the blame, all the responsibility, all the weight of sin on a single woman. It simplifies a complex situation, turning an elaborate curse into a simple punishment for female sexual desire. And more importantly, more revealingly, it ends the story exactly where it is most comfortable. Most convenient for those who hold social and religious power. The priest, he is rarely mentioned in official versions. When he appears as a passive victim, seduced, tempted, led into sin by a manipulative woman. He suffers no consequences. He does not become a monster. He does not burn in eternal flames. He does not lose his head and run screaming through the darkness. He continues his life normally, protected by the hierarchy of the church, protected by a community that does not want scandal, protected by the collective silence that keeps power structures intact. Maybe he is transferred to another parish. Maybe he is required to say a few extra penitential prayers. Maybe he receives a private reprimand from his superior, but he does not become a monster. Only does. And have you ever asked yourself, why? Have you ever questioned this glaring disparity? Have you ever thought about who benefits from this narrative that blames only the woman? Of course not. Because the story is told in a way that discourages questioning, that presents punishment as just, deserved, inevitable. That normalizes the idea that women who transgress must be turned into walking warnings for other women. But what if I told you that this entire version, this whole explanation of sin and divine punishment, is a carefully constructed lie? What if I told you that the real reason for the curse is far more sinister, far more political, far more about social control than any genuine religious morality? Would you believe me? Or would you continue repeating the story the way it has always been told, without questioning, without investigating, exactly as those in power want you to do? What priests never tell you when they repeat this legend from the pulpit, what they deliberately, consciously omit in every sermon, in every official version recorded in church archives, is that the curse did not begin with sexual sin. It began with forbidden knowledge. In much older rule versions, those that existed long before the Catholic Church consolidated its power in the Brazilian interior, those passed down only orally from mother to daughter, from grandmother to granddaughter, never written in official documents, never recorded in ecclesiastical archives, never allowed into authorized narratives. The woman was not punished merely for loving a priest or having a sexual relationship with him. She was punished, cursed, turned into an abomination for knowing something she was never meant to know, for witnessing something that should have remained hidden forever, for hearing words that should never have reached her ears, a confession that should never have been spoken aloud outside the sacred confessional, a ritual performed behind locked and reinforced wooden doors, far from curious eyes, far from daylight. An ancient pact disguised as Christian prayer, masked as pious devotion, hidden beneath layers of Catholic liturgy. Some rural versions, told only on moonless nights by very old women whose eyes have seen many generations born and die, say she accidentally overheard a confession involving spilled blood and ritual fire. Something far, far older than the Catholicism imported by Portuguese colonizers, ancestral practices that the Catholic Church encountered when it arrived in Brazil. Indigenous practices mixed with African beliefs brought by the enslaved, practices the Church could not completely eliminate. So it absorbed them, transformed them, superficially Christianized them, and then vehemently denied ever having known or practiced them. Religious syncretism is not just about Catholic saints representing African origin. It is about deeper, older, more powerful rituals being secretly performed by those who were supposed to be fighting these pagan superstitions. Other whispered accounts claim she witnessed, through a crack in a door or a half-open window, an absolutely forbidden rite intended to spiritually bind the land, the people living on it, in collective guilt under the name and authority of God. A ritual of domination disguised as blessing. A curse presented as divine protection. Imagine priests performing ceremonies that appear in no official Vatican book, mixing Catholic Latin with words from indigenous languages, using Christian symbols alongside elements the church itself would consider heretical, creating spiritual bindings that guaranteed obedience, silenced dissent, maintained control through supernatural fear, and she saw it, or heard it, or discovered it somehow. In the darkest and most disturbing versions, those told only in hushed tones by people who seemed genuinely terrified to recall them, she did not merely witness these secret rituals. She tried to speak about them. She tried to expose what she saw. She tried to reveal the truth to others in the village. She tried to expose the hypocrisy, the manipulation, the hidden control exercised by those who presented themselves as humble servants of God. And it was precisely at that moment, the instant she opened her mouth to speak, to reveal, to denounce, that the curse was sealed upon her mortal flesh, irrevocably and eternally, not by God, not by the devil, but by those who had everything to lose if their secrets were revealed. Because this, you must understand, was never about sexual morality. It was never about punishing a woman for desiring the forbidden man. It was never about protecting clerical celibacy. It was always, from the very beginning, about social control, about silencing dissenting voices, about keeping power secrets buried where no one could dig them up and examine them in daylight. It was about turning a witness into a warning. And the most effective way to create a warning is not simply to kill someone. Anyone can kill. Murder is common. It is forgettable. It is temporary. But turning someone into a monster, into a legend told for generations, into a walking symbol of horror people see in their nightmares, that is permanent control. That is absolute power. And this woman, whose name was erased from history, deliberately forgotten, never recorded in any official document, became exactly that. An eternal symbol of what happens when you know too much and make the fatal mistake of trying to speak. Now let's talk about what really happens to her, about the true nature of this curse, about the torment that never ends, because the transformation is not a swift mercy. It is not an instant punishment that ends in seconds of acute pain followed by numbness. It is not an efficient execution. It is slow, deliberately, cruelly slow, painful on levels the human mind was not designed to process, and worse, far worse. It is eternal, repeating endlessly without hope of end. Every Thursday night, at the exact moment the sun disappears completely below the horizon and darkness takes total control of the world, her body begins to convulse violently in ways no human body should be able to contort. Bones crack loudly enough to be heard meters away. They break and reform, breaking and rebuilding at anatomically impossible angles, transforming a human structure into something else entirely. The spine elongates, vertebra by vertebra. The legs bend backward, knees reversing their natural direction. The arms shrink, fingers fusing, nails hardening into something darker, harder. The skin does not simply tear like fabric being cut. It burns from the inside out, as if literal fire were being ignited beneath the surface. Blisters form and burst. Entire layers of epidermis disintegrate like paper consumed by flame, revealing pulsing muscle beneath that also begins to transform, fibers reorganizing into new patterns. Human muscles writhe like agonizing snakes, lengthening, thickening, adapting for a quadrupedal form that was never natural to her. Internal organs rearrange brutally, lungs expanding, heart shifting position, stomach and intestines reconfiguring to digest things humans were never meant to digest. And throughout this horrific process, through every second of this grotesque metamorphosis, she is conscious, completely, totally, inescapably conscious. There is no merciful fainting, no shock that numbs nerves, no mental dissociation to protect her from the trauma. She feels everything, every bone breaking, every muscle tearing, every cell in her body being forced to become something else against every law of nature. But the most horrifying part, the part most versions of the legend do not mention because it reveals too clearly the true cruelty behind the curse, is what happens to her head. Her head does not fall. She is not decapitated by a sharp blade or a merciful guillotine that would make the process relatively quick. It does not disappear in an instant. The process is gradual and agonizing. First, the skin of her face begins to burn, starting at the cheeks and spreading outward. Then the facial muscles begin to melt, literally melt like wax, under intense heat. Her eyes, those human eyes that saw what should never have been seen, burn in their sockets, slowly evaporating while she can still feel. Her mouth, that mouth that tried to speak the truth, seals permanently shut, lips fusing, teeth dissolving, tongue turning to ash. Not because she has nothing left to say, but because the curse ensures she will never say anything again. Her skull then begins to disappear, not falling, but evaporating, bone turning to smoke. And in the place where a human head should exist, where her thoughts, her identity, herself should be, rises a vertical column of living fire, fire that burns without ever being consumed, fire that illuminates but offers no comforting warmth, fire that causes constant, unending pain but does not kill, never kills. Because death would be mercy and this curse was not created to be merciful. Flames that dance and twist, sometimes forming shapes that almost resemble a screaming face, a mouth open in silent agony, eyes begging for an end that will never come. And the worst part, the absolute worst, she feels every millisecond of it. Every microtransformation, every tiny cellular change, every subsequent step she takes on the earth with hooves that are not hers. Every impossible breath inside a body that should not be able to breathe but still must. Every desperate, deafening scream trapped inside a body with no physical mouth to open, no vocal cords to vibrate, no tongue to form words that could express the infinite horror of her existence. Every silent scream carrying the truth she tried to tell. The denunciation she attempted, the words stolen from her and replaced with mute fire, her soul. Because yes, she still has a soul, still human at some fundamental level, despite her monstrous appearance, does not move on to whatever exists after death. It does not descend to any Christian hell, where at least there would be others, society even in torment. It does not ascend to any paradise, heaven, nirvana, or spiritual peace promised by religions. She remains trapped, suspended, frozen between worlds in a limbo that is neither life nor death, neither physical nor spiritual, nothing that has a name in any known theology. Condemned to repeat the same terrible night, the same brutal transformation, the same desperate run, forever. Literally forever. Not for 100 years, not for 1,000, but forever, until the very concept of time loses meaning. Forever. And most people who casually tell this legend as if it were just another ghost story say she runs to punish sinners, to hunt transgressors, to deliver divine justice through terror. But the truth whispered in the deepest interior of Brazil, among very old people whose eyes have seen things that should not exist. People who wake up sweating in the middle of the night, even decades after witnessing something, people who instinctively lower their voices when this topic arises, is fundamentally different. She is not chasing anyone. She is not hunting sinners. She is not dispensing divine justice. She is running in absolute panic, running from something that is behind her, something that pursues her, something far, far worse than any human conception of hell. And every Thursday, when the transformation takes her again, she runs trying to escape it, but she never does. She never will. There's a specific, deliberate, ritualistic reason why she never stops running on that particular night. A reason she never rests, not even for a single moment of peace. And there is a very specific reason, deeply rooted in religious and spiritual symbolism, why Thursday night matters so critically in this curse. Thursday is the night before Friday, the day of Jesus Christ's crucifixion. The day that, in Christian theology, represents the moment of greatest divine suffering, when God chose to experience human death. But Thursday night specifically represents something else in spiritual cosmology. It is the night of agonizing waiting, of heavy, oppressive silence before the storm, of guilt not yet expiated, sacrifice not yet completed, redemption not yet arrived. It is the moment of maximum spiritual tension, when everything is suspended between condemnation and salvation. At the Last Supper, Jesus knew what was coming. Judas had already made his deal of betrayal. The soldiers were already preparing. The cross was already being built, but it had not yet happened. Everything was waiting, suspended, incomplete. It is this state of eternal incompletion that her curse represents. In many spiritual traditions around the world, not only Christianity, but indigenous, African, ancient European beliefs, Thursday night is considered a time when the boundaries between the physical and spiritual worlds dangerously weaken, when entities that normally cannot cross find passages, when ancient curses renew their strength, when pacts sealed centuries ago reassert their power. It is when ghosts walk more freely, when spirits can manifest physically more easily, when the veil between worlds becomes thin as paper, almost transparent, almost non-existent. And it is precisely at this moment of weakened reality that her curse tightens its cruel grip on her imprisoned soul. Not by shunsy, not by coincidence, but by deliberate design. Whoever created this curse, and notice I say created, not invoked by God, knew exactly what they were doing. They understood spiritual cycles deeply. They knew how to bind a soul to a specific temporal pattern. They possessed knowledge far beyond the superficial Catholic theology taught in Sunday Mass. People who claim to have seen the Headless Mule, and there are literally hundreds scattered throughout the Brazilian countryside. Ordinary people with no formal education in folklore. People with absolutely no reason to invent stories or seek attention. People who would rather never have seen anything at all always describe the same terrifying pattern. This is not random variation in testimony. This is multiple independent witnesses describing the same phenomenon, and that should tell us something important about the nature of this curse. First comes this silence. Not ordinary silence. Not the peaceful quiet of a normal rural night where you still hear crickets, winding trees, nocturnal animals moving, but a deep, unnatural, oppressive silence that seems to swallow all sound around you like an acoustic black hole. People describe it as if the entire world were holding its breath, as if reality itself were pausing. Insects stopped singing abruptly, as if a switch had been flipped. Cicadas that make constant noise for hours suddenly go mute. Crickets that normally create that nocturnal symphony fall silent instantly. Owls stop hooting. Bats stop emitting ultrasonic sounds as they hunt. Dogs, and this is consistent in literally every account, hide. They do not bark. They do not growl. They do not investigate bravely like they normally would. They hide under beds, trembling uncontrollably as if having seizures, refusing absolutely to come out even when called by their owners, even when offered food. Some urinate from pure fear. Some become temporarily Horses on farms become violently agitated in their pens, rearing, kicking fences, desperately trying to escape something they feel, but cannot yet see. Large cattle huddle together in corners, pressing against each other, seeking safety in numbers. The wind stops completely. It does not gradually die down. It stops suddenly, totally. Leaves that were rustling become still. Branches that were swaying freeze in place. It is as if the air itself has been removed, replaced by something heavier, denser, harder to breathe. Trees stand utterly motionless, creating an artificial landscape that looks more like a painted scene than living nature. Not a single leaf moves. Not a single branch sways. The air becomes heavy, extremely dense, thick as if it had physical substance. People describe it as trying to breathe through a wet blanket, as if each breath requires conscious, deliberate effort, as if the atmosphere itself is gently trying to suffocate them. The temperature drops, not gradually over minutes, but suddenly, dramatically. Some report a drop of 10, 15 degrees in seconds. Even on hot summer nights, they feel bone-deep cold. They see their breath condense in the air, something that should not happen in that climate. And then, always, consistently, inevitably, comes the sound hooves, striking the ground at a speed no living animal should be capable of, slamming into dirt roads, stones, earth, with a metallic, resonant force that is almost musical in its impossible rhythm. It is not the sound of a galloping horse. Anyone who has heard horses knows that instinctively. It is faster, heavier, more deliberate, more wrong in some fundamental way the brain registers before the conscious mind can process it. The rhythm is perfectly regular, almost mechanical, like a macabre metronome counting time at an impossible speed. Thud dash, thud dash, thud dash, thud dash, thud dash, thud, without variation, without break, without rest. The sound echoes through the night like church bells tolling for a funeral, but infinitely faster, infinitely more threatening. Sparks appear where the hooves strike the ground. Not normal sparks like metal scraping stone, but bursts of bright light, sometimes green-blue, sometimes red, that momentarily illuminate the ground like small terrestrial lightning strikes. Tiny explosions of energy erupt with each step, leaving dark, scorched marks on the earth. Some witnesses describe the sparks forming strange geometric patterns on the ground, symbols they do not recognize but that seem to mean something terrible. Marks that burn into the retina even after closing their eyes. Shapes that cause severe headaches just from looking at them. And then comes the smell. Oh God, the smell. Thick, acrid smoke that burns the nostrils and throat. Pure sulfur, like hundreds of matches being struck at once, but 1,000 times more intense. Burning hair, not the distant smell of hair in a fire, but close, intimate, like it is burning centimeters from your face. Flesh too, some say. Not meat cooking on a grill, but flesh being incinerated, carbonized, destroyed. It is a smell that enters the lungs and does not leave. That clings to clothing for days. That contaminates olfactory memories so deeply that some people report smelling it again years later at random moments. Triggering instant panic attacks. When she finally passes and you know she has passed, not because you see her, but because you feel the change in air pressure. In atmospheric weight, the land remembers. The earth literally retains memory of her passage in physical, measurable, undeniable ways. The morning after a Thursday when she was seen, inexplicable things are found. Patterns that repeat in different regions, in different eras, reported by people who have never spoken to each other, who do not know each other's experiences, but describe exactly the same phenomena. Animals are found dead across fields and pastures, but not ordinary death. There are no visible wounds, no blood spilled, no signs of predator attack or disease. Their bodies are intact, unmarked, but completely lifeless. And their eyes, oh God, their eyes, they remain open, wide. Frozen in an expression of absolute terror so intense that even experienced farmers, people who have slaughtered hundreds of animals for food, people accustomed to animal death in all its forms, refuse to look directly at them. The eyes appear to be staring at something specific, something that is no longer there but remains imprinted on their retinas at the moment of death, as if they saw something that literally stopped their hearts from sheer terror, that froze their souls at the moment of death, killing them not through physical violence, but through pure, absolute fear. Veterinarians called to examine these animals are baffled. They cannot determine cause of death. Autopsies reveal nothing. Healthy organs, no poison, no disease, no trauma. It is as if they simply stopped, as if life were extracted from them without leaving a physical trace. But there is a disturbing consistency. They all die with their bodies oriented in the same direction, all looking toward the same point on the horizon, all frozen mid-attempt to flee, legs extended, muscles tense, but dead before they could take a single step. Crops burn in ways that defy natural explanation. They do not burn randomly like ordinary fires. They do not burn in circles like lightning strikes. They burn in perfectly straight lines, as if something deliberately traced its path through the fields. Lines that stretch 4 kilometers in precise geometry. Lines that make exact 90-degree turns. Lines that sometimes form symbols when viewed from above, patterns no one recognizes but that cause inexplicable discomfort just from looking at them. The fire in these burnings does not behave like normal fire. It burns only what lies directly in its path, leaving grass untouched centimeters away. It completely carbonizes some plants while leaving others beside them unharmed. It does not follow logic of fuel, wind, or heat. It follows a pattern that seems intentional. Agronomists, agricultural engineers, rural fire specialists examine these fields and cannot explain them. Some admit privately, never publicly, that the burn patterns make no physical sense, that they violate what we know about fire behavior, that they seem almost drawn, and people are affected too. Individuals wake up Friday morning, people who were safely inside their homes, doors locked, windows closed, who did not leave during Thursday night with deep bruises on their skin. Not ordinary bruises from simple impact, but bruises in the perfectly defined shape of horseshoes. U-shaped marks with clearly delineated curves and openings. These bruises appear in random places: backs, chests, arms, legs, sometimes faces. They sometimes appear in clusters, as if multiple hooves had stepped on them. They cause intense pain when touched, pain that lasts weeks, sometimes months. Pain disproportionate to an ordinary bruise, pain that even strong analgesics barely relieve. People wake with these marks with absolutely no memory of how they got them, no memory of the night before, sometimes no memory of several days prior, as if entire chunks of time were erased. Only the physical mark remains, and the inexplicable, deep, visceral fear that accompanies it. Some wake screaming without knowing why. Others wake in places different from where they went to sleep, in kitchens, yards, roads, with no memory of how they got there. Some wake with torn clothes, shoes caked in dirt, as if they had run for kilometers during the night. And there are those who made the fatal mistake of looking, those who, hearing the hooves, feeling the presence, seeing the approaching glow of fire, looked directly at where the head should be, looked into the flames, met the fire's gaze. Those are never the same. Some completely lose the ability to speak, not due to physical damage to vocal cords. Doctors examine them and find everything functioning normally, but words simply do not come out, as if the trauma created a psychological block so deep the brain refuses to allow verbal communication. They can make sounds, can moan and scream, but formed words, articulated language, never again. Others develop a constant, unending tremor that never disappears. No matter what they do, what medication they take, what therapy they try, their hands shake. Then their arms, eventually their entire bodies develop a subtle but constant tremor that prevents fine motor work. Writing clearly, holding a cup without spilling. Many simply go insane. Slowly, progressively, inevitably, they begin seeing patterns where none exists, hearing whispers no one else hears, holding conversations with people who are not there, developing extreme paranoia, believing they are being followed, watched, hunted by something invisible. They draw on walls, always the same strange geometric symbols that belong to no known language. Symbols that hurt to look at too long, that cause nausea in those who see them, that seem to vibrate with their own energy despite being just graphite or charcoal on ordinary surfaces. They wake screaming every night at the same hour, always between 3 and 4 a.m. The witching hour when the veil between worlds is thinnest. They scream the same things, words in languages they do not know, phrases in dead tongues no local scholar can fully identify. And the most disturbing, revealing, consistent detail among all these cases, all of them, without exception, regardless of when they were affected, where they live, their age or background, repeat the same sentence, word for word, syllable for syllable, with the same intonation, rhythm, desperate urgency. She is trying to warn us, not she is punishing us, not she is hunting us, not she is dangerous. She is trying to warn us. Warn us of what? No one can explain. When asked, they become confused, as if they do not remember saying it. Or they fall silent, staring into nothing, tears streaming down their faces, unable to articulate the terror they feel but cannot name. Psychiatrists who treat these cases, and there are real medical records, not just anecdotes, are disturbed. They do not use that word lightly. Professional doctors trained to maintain emotional distance privately admit being disturbed by these patients, because the symptoms do not fit any standard diagnosis, because the consistency across cases cannot be explained by mass hysteria or social suggestion. And because some of these psychiatrists, after months treating these patients, begin having the same nightmares, seeing the same symbols, hearing the same whispers, as if prolonged exposure to their madness were contagious, as if the knowledge once seen cannot be unseen, as if the truth the headless mule carries is a mimetic infection that spreads through proximity and attention in many regions of Brazil, especially in the most isolated rural areas where ancient traditions are still taken more seriously than modern laws. People believe the curse can be broken, that there is one way, only one, to free her from this eternal torment. One way to end her infinite suffering and restore her humanity. If someone can remove the silver bridle she wears, this bridle appears in nearly all detailed descriptions. Always sever never another metal, always shining intensely even in the deepest darkness as if it had its own light, always firmly fastened around what would be a mule's muzzle, just below where infernal fire burns where her head should be. But this crucial detail, this absolutely essential element to understanding the true nature of the curse, is rarely explained fully, even by those who know the legend intimately. People mention the bridle in passing as a minor fact, without exploring its real significance. The bridle is not merely a physical restraint, not just a bit to control a rebellious animal, not an ornamental detail. It is a spiritual seal, a magical containment mechanism, a tangible symbol of authority and domination made physical. In occult traditions, ritual magic, spiritual practices across multiple cultures worldwide, silver is used to seal, contain, bind. Silver blocks spiritual energy. Silver prevents transformation. Silver traps entities between states, and this specific bridle was forged or invoked or manifested through ritual, depending on which rural version you hear, to do one specific thing. Keep her voice silenced. To ensure the truth she tried to speak can never, ever be spoken again. She was not merely turned into a monster to scare or punish her. She was turned specifically into a headless monster, without mouth, without tongue, without physical ability to communicate, and then to absolutely guarantee she would never find another way to communicate what she knows. A silver bridle was added as the final seal. That is why removing the bridle is said to break the curse, because removing the seal would allow her to finally speak, would allow the buried truth to be revealed, would allow the forbidden knowledge that caused her original transformation to finally be communicated to the world, and those who created this curse simply cannot allow that. Over the centuries, since the curse was created, there have been brave or insane, depending on perspective, people who tried to remove the bridle, tried to break the curse, tried to free her. Some were motivated by genuine compassion, horrified by the eternal torment of an innocent soul. Some were driven by curiosity. Some were professional curse breakers. Some were simply fools who did not understand what they were dealing with. Almost all died. And those who did not, they wished they had. The stories of their deaths are disturbingly similar. Bodies found twisted into physically impossible positions. Spines bent at angles human bones do not bend. Limbs torn off not by external force, but as if muscles had ripped themselves apart. Faces frozen in expressions of terror so intense witnesses turned the bodies before burial, unable to bear looking at them. Some are found covered in burns, but burns from the inside out, as if their blood had boiled in their veins. Others are found physically intact, but with brains that literally exploded inside their skulls. Gray matter leaking from noses, ears, eyes. And there are survivors. Yes, there are those who somehow physically survive the encounter. They end up in psychiatric institutions permanently. There is no recovery, no effective treatment, no medication that helps. They spend the rest of their lives in padded rooms, rocking back and forth, murmuring endless incoherences about fire and sin and truths that cannot be spoken. Some become catatonic, staring at nothing, responding to no external stimuli. Their bodies live, hearts beating, lungs breathing, but their minds are completely absent, as if their consciousnesses were ripped out, leaving empty shells. Others become violent in specific ways. They do not attack people randomly, but compulsively attempt to tear out their own tongues, to pierce their own eardrums, to blind their own eyes, as if desperately trying to ensure they cannot communicate something. As if the knowledge inside them is so dangerous, their survival instinct has been reprogrammed to destroy any means of communication. And there are those who speak, oh yes, some speak constantly, without pause, without rest, a non-stop stream of words day and night. But they are not words in any recognizable language, not Portuguese, not indigenous tongues, not ecclesiastical Latin. They are sounds that resemble language but cannot be processed by the human brain, causing severe headaches in anyone who listens for more than a few minutes, vibrating at frequencies wrong for normal human perception. Linguists have tried to decipher these languages, recorded hours of audio, analyzed phonetic patterns, looked for a grammatical structure, and they discovered something terrifying. There is structure, there are patterns, there is syntax. It is a real functional language. just not a human one, not a language meant for human throats to speak. It is as if these people were forced to become unwilling translators for something that should never be translated. That is why elders in the countryside, very old people with eyes that have seen generations come and go, say something very specific. They say, the bridle was never meant to be removed. It was created to keep her silent, to permanently ensure the truth she tried to tell remains buried forever. And more. They whispered that removing the bridle would not free her at all, would not end her suffering, would not restore her humanity, because the curse is deeper than the seal. The bridle is only the silencing mechanism. The true curse is stitched into her soul in ways that transcend any physical symbol. Removing the bridle would only create something far worse. A headless mule that can speak, and the powers that created this curse would do anything, literally anything, to prevent that. There are entire towns scattered across the Brazilian interior where absolutely no one approaches open fields, dirt roads, or isolated areas on Thursday nights, no matter the reason, no matter the urgency. Thursday night, these communities enter a voluntary, informal lockdown, absolutely respected by all. And the most revealing part, it is not because everyone consciously believes in monsters. Many are skeptics by day, many are educated, many laughed at superstition. When younger, many are declared atheists, but because too much has happened over decades, generations, centuries, for coincidence to reasonably explain, because there are statistical patterns that should not exist, because there is accumulated physical evidence that does not disappear just because you do not believe in it. Even the most fervent skeptics avoid certain roads on Thursday nights. They give rational excuses, but their hands shake slightly as they lock doors. Their eyes glance nervously into darkness. Their hearts beat faster. Fear does not require belief to function. It only requires memory. And these places have memory. In some villages, the name Headless Mule is never spoken aloud after sunset. Ever. People use euphemisms. That thing, the one that runs, the fire, she, because attention, once drawn, cannot be undone. And if you ever hear hooves on a Thursday night, do not follow this sound. Do not look at the fire. And above all, do not try to hear what she is trying to say, because some truths were never meant to be freed.